Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 201st episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. And if you missed it last week, we had a 200th episode celebration with Dr. Jonathan Ashong-Lamptey. So if you didn't join in the celebrations and there's a special offer, do go back and check out that offer. But for July, we are starting with a mini-series on friendship and mental health. But before you carry on with today's show, have you watched my TEDx talk about the connection between culture, race, and mental health? It's something you can watch in your break as it's just 12 minutes long. The link is in the show notes, but I'll also give it to you here. It is bit.ly/TEDx Wolves. That's WOLVESLO. And I really hope you enjoy it because it was a labor of love. And if you did enjoy it, please leave positive comments on YouTube and share and like. And also don't forget to link in with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. On Facebook and Twitter, it's at Diverse Minds UK, and LinkedIn, it is my name, Layla Akai. Okay, so let's go back to talking about friendships and mental health. So why did I want to talk about this today? I know it's a topic I haven't covered, and it's something I'm thinking about as the year for the year ahead. So if you're interested and you think this would be a good topic to delve into more, please do drop me a line. And I also attended a civil partnership at the end of June where I saw a number of university friends that I hadn't seen, some of whom I hadn't seen in over 15 years. And it really got me thinking about friendship, mental health, what it means, what it represents. So as first, we are going to dive into definitions. So how do we actually define friendship, and who is a friend and who's our friend and who's not our friend? We think about those discussions that might go on in the playground, but actually they go on way into our lives. So the definition of a friend for most of us is someone who we feel connected to. We might have values in common, things that we've done together in common, life stages in common. And it's someone that we share some kind of bond with. And it's usually someone that we feel a sense of ease with, that we trust. And we also know from the pandemic that friends can be in person or online, someone close to us or far away, like a neighbor, or maybe an old friend that has moved to Australia. And I know many of us in the UK definitely have that. I have a number of friends in Australia who I miss very much. And have not had the chance to go and see them. And how do you define deep friendship then, or a very close friendship? And in fact, we can also sort of think about what is true friendship. And many of us, we may feel that we had close friendships and we don't anymore, or maybe certain friendships that were surface level have become deep friendships. And we will all have kind of long-term friendships that have developed over a number of years. Maybe it's someone you've worked with, or someone fairly new in your life, and how that friendship changes. So it isn't, one size fits all. And we also know that some friends may be casual. They may be acquaintances that you talk to sometimes and enjoy each other's company, but that connection isn't very strong. And I know people who become parents then usually have a collection of people that they become friends with from that childhood experience, from National Childbirth Trust classes or any kind of pre-childbirth class, equivalents, or going to baby groups, etc. And it can also be someone, of course, if we think about how we see our friends' mental well-being, people that you might feel more deeply connected with and you can rely on them for support, people that you might be able to talk and laugh easily with and share your ups and downs of your life very openly. And I think another element of friendship is that it feels quite reliable. And I know with many of my friends, particularly my dear friends that I have from sixth form, we don't really get to see each other that much anymore. And I miss those times when I used to see them every single day. I went to a very big sixth form college in Cambridge, and actually a number of us revisited that space. It was closed, but we took some really lovely photos outside the gate, and we were reminiscing to people that I don't see very much. One of them lives in Switzerland. Many of them two of them are doctors, and they're incredibly busy. They live across the country, but I know that if I pick up the phone, it doesn't feel like any time has passed. So it's very easy to pick up from where you left off. And I think also deep and true friendships can stand that test of time and challenges, and how we shift and adapt in different periods of our life as well. And the fact that they are really held on mutual respect and care for each other's well-being. And I personally feel that friends, much more than people we're related to or family, can be that ear to talk to, that shoulder to cry on, that judgmental perspective that we need, that we don't always receive from family. That will resonate more or less with certain people. And friends can help our sense of belonging, improve our self-confidence, and help reduce stress and anxiety. There's been, lots of research about connection. There's that famous TED talk, and I can't remember who delivered it, about the number one thing that creates longevity and reduces mental and physical ill health is close friendships and community. And they encourage positive health and well-being because we have that support system. And I did a whole podcast episode about connection and mental health. So if you want to check that out, it is episode 75. So no matter how old you are, what you're going through, healthy and close friendships encourage positive mental health and well-being. And we know friends that celebrate with you through the good times in life and are there with you when they're not so great either. And in a study of 280,000 people by Chopik at Michigan State University, they actually reported that friendship is a strong predictor of both health and happiness. And especially for older adults, relationships with friends correlate with positive effects even more than family relationships. And personally, this is not the research, but I think it's because you get to choose your friends, right? You get to choose the people you want to spend time with, whereas family, it's not, you don't choose them. And there's always a navigation part to it, I think. And there's always roles that people play in families, which, yes, does happen in friendship groups, but it is slightly different. And then there's evidence for social connections and social support and meaning relationships is proven by a landmark study by Holt Lundstad at Brigham Young University. This used meta-analysis and found that having a few close friends was more important for physical health outcomes, such as high blood pressure, heart disease, depression, cancer, than diet or exercise habits. And if we didn't have that, it was on a par with smoking. And of course, the Joe Cox report that was published talked about the fact that daily loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of the negative impact on your body. So I have put the resources in there. It's actually from a Forbes article. I took that information. So do check that out in the show notes. And episode 75 about how love promotes positive mental health. And that's not just about heteronormative love. I've talked about love in the wider spectrum. And also episode 31, staying connected during social isolation, which, surprise, surprise, was an episode I put together during the beginning of the pandemic. So I really hope you're enjoying the content of my podcast and you want to keep up to date. If you are, then why not join my bi-monthly newsletter? When you sign up, you'll receive a free copy of my ebook, The Mentally Healthy Leading Manager. And the link is bit.ly/DMMCHSU. Okay, so I've outlined how brilliant friendships are, and we know that they are, but what about when they go wrong? We don't often get to speak about this. And I think friendship dissolution, arguments, fallouts, and essentially breakup, which is a very, I think, a North American way to phrase it, is real. And of course, if this happens in the workplace, it can become increasingly difficult. And I think friendship fallouts can be particularly challenging because a close friend is someone you really look to for that emotional support, that continuity, the way you interact, someone who shares your values, who often sees the world in a very similar way to you. And as we've seen, friends can be much more important than family. So it can be such a shock. And I want to provide you a quote here from Dr. Akwa Boateng, a Philadelphia-based psychologist. And she says, friendships can play a role in overall mental health and emotional health. When they end, it's a big shift. Many people wonder how they'll be able to cope without the support of that friendship. And as I mentioned, because we choose our friends, we can think, oh, sugar, what did I do wrong? So it can feel a lot worse. And I think there is a real sense of mourning. And we all have friendships prior to any romantic relationships we have, whether that's nursery, playgroup, friends of friends, baby groups, etc., school, university. So you grow up with these shared experiences, jokes, memories, and not being able to discuss this with those key people is deeply, deeply painful. Where do you go with that? And there isn't necessarily the space to have those conversations. And when people share your perspective and then suddenly they're not there anymore, the hurt can be felt so acutely. And I think sometimes it's not that anything dramatic happens. It might not be an argument. It might not be something terrible. Like, my experience is I had now, someone who was a very, very dear friend, and she saw me through an incredibly tough time. And she doesn't really speak to me now. And it's really hard because I'll leave messages or voicemails and they'll just go unanswered. And this person is a parent, they have a significant number of children. So I understand that, but it's just really tough, especially when I know that she's definitely speaking to other people. And the other thing is, we're not at school anymore, so I don't feel like I go to any of our mutual friends and say anything, because then it feels like I'm being really bitchy and ungrateful. And she's clearly upset with me about something, but she won't really tell me. So yeah, I think that adds a dimension to it. And I've just had to say to myself, you know what, I'm going to do this before Christmas. I just thought I'm going to do this one last message, and then I'm going to leave it there. And I've had to leave it because I feel like I'm really pushing into resistance, and she really doesn't want to know me anymore. And I think especially for women, the motherhood dynamic really changes things. And in next week's episode, I speak to Christine Pride and Joe Piazza about this and their new book. So do tune into that, where we talk a lot about motherhood and the way that women are pitted against each other, the people who choose to be mothers, people who choose not to be mothers, and the people who can't be mothers, even though that's not their choice, and the dynamic that brings. So I think that's really hard. I feel it's less of an issue with men, in the sense that, of course, they don't tend to be primary carers. So yeah, it's really tough. And I think we all have these examples where we just think, what happened? And I often find these things that she sent me throughout the years, really lovely things, and writing and poetry, and I just think, oh, what went wrong? And I really can't pinpoint it, because, like I said, we haven't had a dramatic fallout, nothing has been said, nothing nasty, which I'm very grateful for. But there is a hole there. And yeah, it's really not nice. And when I think about it, I do feel very, very sad. And then thinking about workplace friendships, which, I'm very lucky to have had a number of really great friends from workplaces, and particularly those relationships of strength since leaving a traditional workplace. But if we're in a traditional workplace, we spend at least a third and half of our waking hours at work each week. And if you want to know more about the impact of nutrition on our working life and nutrition in the workplace, do check out that episode. But of course, our relationships with people at work can be among the most important relationships in our life, because we're spending so much time with them. And having good relationships with colleagues is one of the strongest predictors of people's happiness at work. So I'm talking about personal friendships, but I want to reiterate that we know at work this is really important as well. And if you want to know more, I've linked to a Harvard Business Review article in the show notes about why work friendships go awry and how to prevent it, if you want to know more about that. So how do you look after your well-being when a friendship goes wrong? I think firstly, it's to acknowledge that your pain is real. And that when you have a romantic breakup, it's people kind of come around with ice cream and they're like, oh, are you okay? Or whatever it is. Or, I don't know. It will be different in different cultures. But I think if you talk about a friendship breakup, there is an assumption, I think, that someone's being petty, someone's being silly, you'll sort it out. But like I said, it doesn't have to be a dramatic thing. It can be this dissolution, and suddenly you go, oh, I really wish I could talk to X person about it. And then you can't. So I think it's giving yourself the space and time you need, just as you would with any other loss. I think it's also about deciding whether, what you could do about something once you've given yourself that space. Would you like to reach out? Would you like to ask what's wrong? I made the decision not to do that because I didn't think it was going to go down well. Every situation's different. Do you want to explain how you feel? Again, it depends on so many things. And indeed, I had another friend who had a similar situation, but it was worse in a way, because these were childhood friends and they just completely stopped speaking to her, and that actually they should have been, present at one of the most important events of her life, and she couldn't even ask them to be there. So I know this isn't a universal experience, and actually much more painful than my experience. I think it's important as well not to kind of push your emotions to one side. If you're struggling with something, how you want to reach out for support and what that support might look like. So, is it through writing? Is it through therapy, counseling? Is it a support group that's similar online or face to face? I think you can also wish your friend well, whether that's to their face on a message or just inside yourself, and just say, I really want the best for them, mentally, and I really want the best for them. And if it's meant to be, they'll come back to me, or there'll be a way that we'll reconnect in the future. And that's challenging, because I think there is a real temptation to go down a vortex and get very stuck in trying to understand what happened, very similar to any kind of romantic relationships. And it might be an opportunity for you to reflect and really take time to support yourself and your future by focusing on what you want and thinking about what positive relationships, all the different types of relationships we have in our life, look like. And I recently completed a positive intelligence course run by Shazad Shamin for coaches. It's absolutely brilliant. He's got a book out, so if you want to check that out, very, very good. Talks about the ways in which our mind sabotages ourselves, and we have 10 different sorts of saboteurs. And there was a very interesting principle in there. So you have the saboteurs and then you have the sage, and your sage is this kind of really powerful part of you when you're in flow, and when you can see things, when you come up with solutions, when you can decide how you want to manage challenges. And one of the things in their course was they talked about that even in any conflict, the other person is 10% right. And I mean, I'm not talking about, when I think about that, I'm not talking about hate conflict. So like not homophobia, not race hate crime, not misogyny. But if we think about conflicts that might occur around, you did this, why did you do that? I feel really hurt by it. Things that aren't based on identity and inequity, but things that we might disagree on. Can we try and see things from their perspective, even if it's just that 10%? And I think that's such a helpful thing to think about, and whether we reach out and say anything, whether we want to do anything about it, but it's to acknowledge what was the 10% that they were right. And I think that can be a useful way, and then you can decide what you want to do with it. And I think the other thing is that we feel a lot of shame and pain when friendships dissolve, because we've chosen these people. How could we not make it quote unquote work? What's the problem? And that pain isn't really validated in society. So 2 more resources for you: Science of People, Friendship Breakup, for some more tips, and also a really great time.com article about friendship breakups being worse than romantic ones. So remember that friendships are super important and they boost our mental health. There's research evidence to show not only the mental health benefits, but the physical health benefits. When they go wrong or they dissolve or there's a fallout, it is extremely painful. There are things that you can do. It needs to be acknowledged in society more, but that grief and that mourning and that loss is absolutely real. And of course, it's part of our ongoing mental health journey, how we want to recover from it and what we want to do. And do join me next week when I speak to authors Christine Pride and Joe Piazza on their new book, which is about to be released. And if you enjoyed this episode, please, why not leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from. And those resources for you, episodes on connection and mental health, self-love and self-esteem as well, episode 76, and the episode on nutrition and work. So that's more about how many hours we spend at work, but you might find that interesting, thinking about work relationships. So I hope you'll join me in the next episode, and take care, everyone. Until then, bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.